Canada.
Wild. I bet that's not what you thought you'd be doing when you were, in high school or something. Did you ever think, oh yeah, that'll be one of my jobs later on in life?
Yes and no. I feel that walking the path of ridiculousness, but making sure to stay within the lines of ridiculousness and not going past ridiculous, which I consider to be outrageous. But staying on the path of ridiculousness will get you places. And as long as you mix professionalism with ridiculousness, then somehow you wind up here.
I love it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like to live by a motto, and that's every day do something that sucks. Every day, whether that's as small as washing the dishes or brushing your teeth, do something that sucks. Get off your butt off the couch, and at least do one thing today that sucks.
I love it.
Veronica.
Yes.
So first of all, I didn't know that you have a podcast. You're running this website, you're going to the States, you got this awesome podcast, and you're testing out your vocal range, a lady of many talents.
Yeah, I think this podcast has been in my sphere for a while, and when I was coming back on the plane from Austin, I just shut everything off and journaled for a while, and I was like, yeah, now's the time. And I've been wanting to deeply research the archetype of the warrior, of the man who has fought professionally and been in combat, and really understand the psychology behind that, what it means to be comfortable and hungry for facing adversity. And so the part of me wanting to do this podcast is just that it will help me to have those conversations with all of you. And so yeah, it was literally, 4 days ago on the plane home from Austin, I was like, podcast, it's called Warriors Raised, and welcome. Nice. You're the second episode, Josh, so it's a total honor to have you here. And yeah,
it's an honor to be here.
Totally.
Where can I find this afterwards? I want to listen. Is it going to be on Apple Music, Spotify?
It's on a platform called Anchor, which I believe is connected to Spotify. So I will definitely send it to you. And I'm also going to upload it to YouTube. So yesterday I talked to John Beneducci. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's up there already, and he'll be out there tomorrow.
Right on. Yeah. I'm gonna share it on all my social media platforms. Get you famous.
Awesome. I love it. And if you have more professional fighters in your realm, send them my way. I would love to talk to as many as possible. I'm hoping to do one a day right now. That's my aim. So here we are. Nice. Yeah, totally. I'd love to dive in with my first question, if that's good with you.
Let's hear it.
Okay. Well, I would love to know if there was an event or a moment for you where you knew you were going to become a professional fighter. There's something that happened.
One thing that I have on a lot of other professional fighters is that I got started very young. I mean, kids are starting really young nowadays, but when I really became professional, when I became really good at fighting, it wasn't really common for kids my age. Like I was 14, 15 years old, starting to win huge tournaments. And yeah, kids were winning judo competitions, or there wasn't really jiu-jitsu, but there was boxing, there was different martial arts. But I went into MMA, and MMA was really just starting to blow up in Canada in the early 2000s, when 2007, 2008, it was really when it was coming to Canada. I think I went to Vancouver Island's very first mixed martial arts tournament for kids, and I think that was one aspect that really helped me. And I realized that I had an advantage because I had already had stand-up. I had already been doing Muay Thai for a couple of years. I had already been doing judo for like 8 years at that point, ever since I was like 7 years old. Whereas a lot of my competition, they were 14, 15-year-old kids who were only in it for a year. And I was absolutely slaughtering them because I just had so much more experience. And I think that's when I really wanted to become professional. And I wanted to get a little bit deeper into it, because truthfully, I was struggling in judo. I was struggling in Muay Thai. The individual martial arts themselves, I like judo. I remember I was 8 years old in my first tournament, and there's some really tough girls out there. There's some really tough ladies, and I'll admit that. But I was 8 years old, and I remember losing to a girl, and I was so mad at myself. And I wanted to come back next year or to the next tournament. And if I saw her again in a tournament, I wanted to beat her. But then she beat me again. And I was really bad at judo, which was my main martial art from a young age, from 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I wasn't good. And I think the biggest thing for me was creating goals and staying determined to meet those goals. And eventually I got better when I was about 12 is when I really started to get good at judo. And then I finally won the provincial championships when I was 13. And where it really started to take off for me was when I branched out from judo, though, because my judo mixed with my Muay Thai was absolutely murking kids 14, 15. And I think that's when I wanted to branch out and become professional.
In that time where you lost to this girl a couple times and things weren't going so well, did you ever want to give up, or were you just, what was your mindset through that time?
I'm a really determined human being, but I find that people nowadays, they approach me, or let's say we're talking at a party, or we're talking at the bar, or it can be anywhere, or at the restaurant, and someone comes up with an awesome idea, and they pitch it to me like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to do this? And then it ends there. They never pursue those goals. Why? Because the goal is too big. And the trick to accomplishing these big goals that people dream to have is to create milestones for yourself. Create 5 milestones. My goal was to beat this girl eventually. And don't get me wrong, her and I are actually good friends now. We've been friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's funny, actually, I never ended up seeing her again until like after that tournament. She beat me when we were 9 years old. I didn't really see her until we were 15, and she was still in it really hard and starting to go professional too. But by that point, I was like 80 pounds heavier than her, and we're in separate divisions. But yeah, we were still training quite a bit. And I could definitely say at 15, I was capable of doing a little bit better against her. But for this circumstance, no, I did not give up. And I think that if I had the mindset of a lot of these people that I talk to that come up with an awesome goal, I would have given up. But being able to make milestones for yourself, how am I going to beat this girl when I'm 9 years old? This is a funny example. Okay, well, first I need to go to training at least 3 days a week. I need to be able to, I have someone that I train with who currently, he's better than me. I need to be able to throw him on his butt. In judo, there's a lot of throws, right? I need to be able to throw him down and get him down and maybe submit him at least once a week. So create these milestones for yourself so that you next year can beat up that 9-year-old girl.
I love it. Yeah. So you weren't at 9 years old, you didn't have your mind set on winning the Olympics. You got there through just having a goal that was right in front of you right now that you were working towards. Would you say that's accurate? And then moving like to the next invitation to fight at a higher level and to try this and to try that. You moved around quite a bit in different martial arts. Is that right?
Yeah, well, judo was my main martial art right up until I was about 11 or 12. Then I dived into Muay Thai, and I was doing Muay Thai and judo at the same time. I never won a competition 7, 8, 9 years old. And being determined led me to wanting to win a tournament before I turned 11 years old. And I did. 10 years old, I got to win my first regional tournament. There was like 16 of us little tykes in this division. It was just Victoria and probably Nanaimo, and I got to win. But every 2 years there's the BC Winter Games, which it's kind of like the Olympics in that there's all these different sports, like you go to them and it's cool because you go to the big hall that everyone kind of shares, and there's skiers, there's snowboarders, there's biathletes, there's that sport where they're skiing and they got to shoot the gun. It was really cool meeting all these athletes from these different sports. I wanted to go to that tournament, but in order to go to that tournament, I had to be the best on Vancouver Island, which was that district. So I went to the tournament and I came third place. So I didn't get to go. But that created determination in my mind, and determination led me to training harder, taking the steps to creating the milestones for myself that I needed to take in order to win the Vancouver Island tournament and make it to the BC Winter Games, which I did when I was 12 years old. But once one goal is conquered, what are you going to do? Got to make another goal for yourself. And I wanted to win the BC Winter Games because I got absolutely annihilated by some really good guys in Vancouver, from Vancouver, Abbotsford, Burnaby, some of the bigger cities. And I wanted to win. So went back next year and I won, which actually was pretty hard because I would have been 14 and I was fighting the 14, 15, 16-year-old division at that point. So
Wow.
just stay focused, and when you beat one goal, create another one for yourself, and that's what kept me going.
Mm-hmm. What do you think sets you, like, aside from what you just shared of that constantly setting that next goal and having attainable goals that you can be working towards each week as well, including like submitting that training partner once a week or those milestones? What do you think sets you apart? Like, I know after you broke through that like losing streak and had your first win, you started having a lot of wins, right? And invitations to bigger and bigger fights. What do you think sets you apart or sets any fighter apart? The like amateurs from the professionals or masters in this world of fighting. What do you think it takes to go from being like that amateur to somebody who is winning pro fights?
I think the community that you surround yourself with is huge. I think a lot of my success thereafter, thanks to, well, I'm a 14-year-old kid, and right when you're hitting that age, it's really easy to dive into some wrong crowds, right? Or potentially maybe your parent is a single parent and they don't have quite the time to focus on you, and therefore you dive into the wrong crowd in high school. But I thank a lot at this point to the great group of guys that were my best friends in high school. Absolutely nerdy individuals. We were all like band nerds. We had a band where we would cover like Metallica and AC/DC songs all the time and hang out on Saturdays and just jam. And I think a lot to those guys because just being friends with like a good group of smart people who this leads me to actually a theory I was working this week, and that theory is that there's people in your life that add value to your life, assets, if you will, and then there's people that are liabilities, I guess, to your life that kind of add a handicap to your life. And the more focus that you have on these people, well, it's sad because maybe these people are the most amusing people to hang out with, or maybe you have a lot of empathy for these people, so you like to hang out with them because it makes you feel better, like you're healing them in some kind of sense. I think that I'm a natural healer and I like to help people quite a bit, but the people I was hanging out with at the time didn't need to be helped, which allowed me to focus on myself more, to be selfish, if you will, which my selfishness was me going to martial arts for 25 hours a week, 5 days a week, 5 hours a day. And yeah, I thank a lot to the community I was hanging out with at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I think it's so true where if you want to succeed at something, being in the right environment is key. Having those training partners, having the community, the brotherhood, the influences, the allies, the assets can really be like make it or break it for a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah, I just see it way too often, especially with friends of mine, where they're stuck in relationships, and I don't mean like relationships with their boyfriend or their girlfriend or their spouse, but relationships potentially with new coworkers that they're hanging out with, or new people that they've met, and or just people that they've been hanging out with for a long time, where these people are just dragging them down into their own shit. Am I allowed to say shit? Is there swearing on this podcast?
Absolutely. Yes, go.
um, they could have so much potential. They have such big dreams, such great aspirations, but the community that they surround themselves with, and I just see it time after again. Every time I meet them, every time I hang out with them, I say, hey, so what have you been up to lately? And it's always the same thing, like, oh, you know, so and so, I had to help them with this or that. Well, so and so needed you to help them with this or that last week or last month. When are you going to focus on yourself? When are you going to do these awesome things? When are you going to do something that sucks?
Yeah.
Because the thing that you're doing that sucks, somehow you're stuck in it. And it's not a good thing that sucks. You should be doing other things that suck.
I think it's an easy pattern that is very normalized in our society, where you fall into that, prioritizing other people's well-being over your own martyrdom or whatever, where you're like looking after people, or there's that almost like that addiction to drama, like what you're saying, like the same problem that happened last week and you're dealing with it again this week. And I truly believe that any individual's greatest gift to themselves, their loved ones, to humanity is their own well-being. And so when you use the word, selfish, that you were like selfishly focused on developing mastery in the world of martial arts, I don't look at it like that. Like, I don't look at selfish in that sense as a negative thing, but as a totally positive thing. Because when you are committed to your own well-being, you allow everyone else around you to rise up. You become an asset rather than being a liability. And I often imagine, like,
Absolutely.
I mean, all of my friends, the people closest to me in my life, are all assets, absolutely, and they all kind of run by that philosophy, either intentionally or not. But I often wonder what it would be like to live in a world where that was normalized, rather than that sort of addiction to drama, or even like you're talking about, like the great ideas, but then no plan or action to back it. It's interesting. Yeah.
No, I think you nailed it right on the head there. Specifically, and I love like talking about my theories that I have. I always have these like theories that I come up with. I love psychology, but it always kind of dives back to well, something that's happening currently in my life, that's or something that I like to think about happened in this story. We're talking about selfishness and kind of focusing on yourself. And I think right around 14, 15, that was a big part of what I needed in my life, was that a good group of guys. But when it comes to selfishness, well, what happens to every 14, 15, 16-year-old boy is, well, girls come into a factor. I think a big part of my success that I think right around that time is that I wanted to kind of do it for the girls in high school as well. Like, I wanted to have this kind of image of winning tournaments all over the place. And I guess if that's the goal, the milestones were winning fights at the time. And I think two of the biggest variables I think during the high school era is those good group of guys and the hot chicks in high school.
Wanting to impress the girls.
Yeah. Which is, it's funny. Because right at that time, 14 was right when I kind of dived into MMA, and that's when I really noticed. I think that there's something to be said with the early 2000s in MMA, that you come in with really good ground game. Royce Gracie, he did it in the UFC. He was battling these guys who just had way worse ground work than him, just submitting them left and right. This like 170-pound guy, absolutely submitting these 250-pound monsters. The same thing I was kind of doing, where I was doing jujitsu like once a month, but my judo really kicked butt for me in these tournaments, 14, 15. That's when I decided, okay, judo, I'm going to do judo and MMA at a really high level. And that's when I started to get fights down in Las Vegas, over in New York. I got invited down to the Randy Couture tournament to compete for the North American Championships between the United States and Canada. And yeah, having so many years in judo really helped in a solid ground game. My ground game was always way better than my stand-up at that time. I like to think of MMA as that there's 3 different kinds of martial arts. Actually, all martial arts, not just MMA, but MMA is technically all martial arts. There's stand-up. I'm talking punching, kicking, my hand, your face, my foot, your shin, striking arts, stand up. I'm talking the karate, I'm talking the taekwondo, I'm talking boxing, kickboxing, kung fu, all of those martial arts. And those ones, I think that there's a big trend right now in mixed martial arts community that's kind of diving back to that, especially in the UFC. You see a way less ground game, I notice, in UFC fights nowadays than you used to. But then there's the groundwork, which jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, those are the 3 big ones when it comes to groundwork. Jiu-jitsu, I think, I might be biased, but I think jiu-jitsu is the best in the world when it comes to groundwork. And I think that groundwork when it comes to MMA is the most important, because if you don't have groundwork, you're not going to get anywhere with an MMA fight. You're going to get taken down, you're going to get submitted. And then there's the transition fighting, getting the guy to the ground. Wrestling, judo, those are the 2 big ones. And that's actually where I always flourished. I noticed, whether I'm fighting a wrestler and I don't want to keep standing up with this guy because he keeps punching me in the head, and that I'm starting to get clocked pretty hard. So big slam to the ground. Or whether I'm fighting a jiu-jitsu fighter who doesn't necessarily have the best takedowns, but I don't necessarily want to go to ground with them because I got good ground, but jiu-jitsu fighters have usually a little bit sneakier groundwork, but we stay kind of stand up, big slam onto the ground. And when you slam a jiu-jitsu fighter on the ground, you can get to a pretty good position, I notice, or wrestling, whatever. And yeah, I thank a lot to my success in MMA. Yeah, transition fighting.
Yeah, that was part of your success, is having a good transition game, being able to like take it to the ground and start in a dominant position for the ground. Did you say?
Yeah. And just being able to slam them onto the ground, it looks flashy. Get a couple ground and pounds, stand them back up, big slam onto the ground again. It's fun.
Yes. I remember when you came to our school and demonstrated. So I would love to hear, if you want to share, I would love to hear either like one of your hardest fights or competitions that you went through, or like one that stands out as being one where you really had to use like everything you have on the mats or in the octagon, wherever you were for that.
Yes. There's 2 fights that come to mind. I'll start with my earlier one when I was 14, and I went to the BC Winter Games for the first time, or no, the second time actually. I went 3 times and I finally got to win on the 3rd time. But my second time, I got 2nd place, and my gold medal match was against this guy named Mark Wally. Mark Wally, if you're listening, shout out, man. I hope you're doing good these days. But he was this absolute monster of a 17-year-old kid when I was 14, who was like from Vancouver or something, and he was just favored to win, and I wanted to beat him so bad. I was so determined, and it was just such a bloody, grueling fight all the way till the end. I was in the zone that day. Like, I had some big wins. Like, I had wins that I probably shouldn't have won, but I was quite in the zone. And that's the thing about martial arts, is that it's an individual sport. You're playing basketball, you're playing soccer, if you're having a bad day, at least you can count on one of your teammates to really pick up your slack. But in MMA, there's a huge mental game. I can see it in UFC fights. Like right when they pull up, right when they do their little stare down, I can usually tell who's going to win the match just off of that, because it's huge mental. If you're not in the game, then you're going to lose. I was in the game that day, but against that fight against Mark Wally, I busted a rib. I think I knocked out one of his teeth. I was bleeding from my eyeball. Yeah, I busted a couple of ribs. I cracked my jaw. But one thing I love about martial arts, especially when you're fighting against like good guys, is that, yeah, we're bloodied all over the place. There's probably 10 broken bones between the two of us, but hey, I'm taking off my gi and we're giving each other a big hug afterwards. And we're holding each other just for 30 seconds. Hey man, that was great fight. And I love that shit. Love it a lot. The other one is when when I went down to Las Vegas to compete in the Randy Couture tournament, which Randy Couture was going to sponsor a bunch of fighters to go over to Sparta, Greece, to fight in the World Championships for pancreation, for youth pancreation. I was 17 here, and I was technically on Team North America, but our team was mainly American. And me being Canadian, I was one of the only Canadian guys. But we were going as both of us, both Canada and the United States, because well, when you're getting free sponsorship, then why not, right?
Yep.
So I found my first couple matches, I guess just being from the United States or from North America, they kind of gave us, I don't want to say like easier countries, but countries probably with less of mixed martial arts person or reputation. So my first fight against Kazakhstan, I kind of just flew through that fight. My second fight against Azerbaijan, that was a little bit harder actually. I had about 5 fights to get me into the top 16. There's like 103 people in my division. And then in top 16, I had to fight Italy first. That was really tough. That guy was actually really good at judo too. He had better judo than me, so I actually had to count more on my Muay Thai and my groundwork. But my semi-final match was against Ukraine, and it was against this Taekwondo fighter who just had the craziest head kicks I've ever seen. I've never fought someone with better head kicks. The guy could read me like a book. It's like he read the newspaper last Tuesday and said, okay, Josh is going to come in for a low takedown at about 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the fight. Make sure you do a flying spinning head kick right at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to remember that for my fight on Friday. Okay. Read me like a book.
Wow.
And every time I would come in for anything, whether, because he was quite a bit taller and a little skinnier than me, he just would fly through the air and nail me perfectly along the jaw, along the face. And there's a couple times there where I was pretty like knocked out. I probably lost a few brain cells to some of these amazing kicks. So I had to use the break time in between rounds to kind of go back to my corner. And fortunately, I can thank my dad quite a bit for being my coach in a lot of these international fights, because he's Muay Thai champion of Thailand, and he's won the judo nationals and such, black belt. So he has some really good MMA experience. And just coming back, he's like, Josh, you got to stop leaning in with your head. You got to get your gloves up. You got to wait for him to go for his kick. Got to grab his leg, get the takedown, get some big ground and pound. But yeah, I broke a couple bones on that fight as well. And having to go into my gold medal match with a broken toe, with a broken foot, the cartilage in my elbow is like hanging and you can like feel it. My knee is all swollen up. And then I think in that circumstance, it was a really hard fight for me, because I had one more fight afterwards. because I beat Ukraine and then I had to fight Russia in my gold medal match. But fortunately, I think he had even a harder time in some of his fights. So we were both pretty beaten up by the end.
You were both coming in all banged and battered.
Yes.
Well, like having your dad be your coach. How
What was
was
it like?
yeah, like what was that like for your relationship as like father son?
You know, I think a lot of my success to my dad. I really do. When it comes to martial arts, I think having him there, my dad, he is the smartest human being I've ever met in very specific ways. Like that guy has called things. He is it's like he has this book that just reads the future. Like this guy with this Taekwondo guy knowing all the time when I'm going to come in for any takedown and knowing when perfectly to hit me. My dad has like a book that says, oh, in 10 years, this is going to be big. Whether it's a UFC fighter and it's their first fight in the UFC and then they become champions, or whether it's a specific type of martial art. I remember being very young and Muay Thai wasn't very big in the UFC yet. Like no one really did Muay Thai. There was a lot of like karate and Taekwondo. And my dad was always telling me like Muay Thai is going to take right over. And next thing you know, Anderson Silva comes in, ends up just dominating the UFC from 2007 to 2013, something like that. Shout out Anderson Silva, the GOAT of the middleweight division. And then Muay Thai all of a sudden was this big phenomenon in the UFC. I think that my dad really helped me in the fact that he just could call things way ahead of time. One example is that I think it would be a lot harder if I was 14 years old to 19 years old now to do what I did because it was such perfect timing, because MMA wasn't very big yet. It was just starting to really blow up, and not everyone, no one had all three. No one had striking, groundwork, and a transition fighting, but I had all three. And my dad perfectly trained me in all three. Of course, transition fighting and groundwork were quite a bit better than my stand-up, but when I had to stand up, I could stand up. And my dad saw that from a mile away. My dad would tell me, mixed martial arts is a new game right now. And you need to know all three of these. And every single one of your opponents is going to be really good at one, maybe two, but you got to exploit them on the third one. And that's one way that's probably one of the main ways how he really helped me. He always used to tell me something too when I was going through high school. He said, Josh, you're allowed to do anything you want. All you got to do is you got to keep winning tournaments and you got to get good grades. But you're allowed, you can do anything you want. I'm not going to look over your life and make sure that you're home by a specific time. You can do anything you want. And I had a lot of leniency in my life, and it kind of taught me to be quite mature, actually. But I had to make sure I did good in sports and kept doing good in school.
Yeah, it's incredible.
He likes to tell that one to people whenever we're out on holidays or something. Like, I do good in sports and do good in school.
Well, I would imagine having that, like the amount of hours you were putting in for training, if you were doing 25 hours a week training, there's not a lot of room for, messing around or partying with that level of dedication and commitment to training and wanting to win. But tell me about that. Was that a thing for you in high school, or?
Partying. I mean, I went to a few high school parties for sure. In fact, in grade 11, right before the movie Project X came out, and my dad was going to Thailand with his wife. I had the house to myself for like a month, and I invited a few friends, but I kind of unfortunately invited this one lady that I've known for a long point of time at that point, but she was trying to become popular. So she invited a few of the popular kids. And next thing you know, I have like 500 people in my house. And that was just an absolute disaster. And yeah, whenever I go to a bar in Langford, British Columbia, specifically this bar called Darcy's.
Yeah.
There's always someone that I went to high school with that always calls me by like my old high school name. Oh, JVMP, which means Josh Van Meurs parties, because a couple of the popular boys made a Twitter page that's just like the Josh Van Meurs party. Like, oh, JVMP. I'm like, okay. Hey, do you still have that tattoo from the party? I'm like, oh man, I'm glad that some people in high school, that's all they know me by. Can't go to that bar without someone bringing it up.
Wow.
But yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
Oh, it's just interesting when you go back to like, it must be interesting for you to go back to where you went to high school and walk into Darcy's and see people you went to high school with, either working there, or hanging out there, or, you know, that bring you right back.
Yeah. And then it's always like it's always the same thing. They always have a buddy they're hanging out with. And this buddy is either like way older or way younger, so they don't know who I am. But they know who I am because they went to that party, or they're from out of town. And then they always like, yo, I gotta tell you the story about this party. And then they always tell the story, and then they want me to show the tattoo, and then they always gotta say something that they did at that party. It's
Wait,
always the same thing.
You got a tattoo at one of these parties?
Not not at the party, but on grad trip, I got pretty drunk when we were down in Dominican Republic, and I got a hashtag tattoo, which is the Twitter page hashtag JVMP as a tattoo.
Okay.
And it's quite the conversation starter.
No doubt. No kidding. I love it. Okay, so this is a bit of a jump, but there's a question I really want to ask you. And I love that I haven't prepared you at all for this question. The question is this: imagine it's 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, and there's a group of people sitting around a dinner table and your name comes up. What would you be most excited to hear them say?
Excited. I would hope that it's something that I haven't accomplished yet. It's hard to imagine where society is going to be in 100 years or 1,000 years. I don't know if things have turned extraterrestrial by that point or not, but I guess I want them to be talking about something that I did. Okay, I got your answer. This is an amazing question, by the way.
Thank you. Take your time.
When there's an expiration date on this, I'm pointing at my body, on my gorgeous hair. There's an expiration date on my clothes, on all these physical things. But intangible assets don't necessarily have an expiration date. Intangible assets, such as your name. The name Josh doesn't have an expiration date, and even while it's a very popular name, lots of people out there named Josh. If you do something important enough, whether that's something that gets you famous, or whether that's something that makes you infamous, people will remember that name. And I really want to make this world a better place. And I also really want to help people in some kind of sense without getting stuck back down into their own shit, right? And I really hope that 1,000 years from now, if my name hasn't been expired, it's because I did something to help a lot of people on a macro level, potentially by being the CEO of some corporation that really helped people, or whether I was a part of a team that saved a large amount of people from a catastrophic disaster. That's what I hope that they're talking about.
Mhm. I love it. What do you think right now, like you mentioned, just like the world right now, what do you think is the main, I mean, I guess I'll just back up. So the, like, I often wonder, what would it be like, for example, if in school, instead of only learning, you know, math and reading and writing and all the other things we learn, what if we also were learning martial arts, meditation, dance, singing? Like, these are the things I think about. And I often wonder what it would be like to live in a world where the experiences that you had as a young, like as a boy, and then as a teenager and as an adult, of, you know, testing yourself and like having that, you know, that girl that beat you, they were like, I gotta go back next year and get her. And then all these different opportunities to train your body, to train your mind, to develop mental mastery, physical mastery, emotional mastery, to be able to know that you can go into a situation like that and defend yourself, attack, like be able to take care of a situation like that. And I often wonder, what would it be like to live in a world where that was commonplace, where this wasn't like an unusual story or an unusual skill set that you have, but that was more common. And I mean, I imagine that a lot of the problems that our society is facing right now would not exist. This is like the lens I come from. But I'm curious to hear from you. What do you think, you know, when you're talking about making a difference on a macro level or helping people, what do you think that would look like for you?
First of all, I can't agree more. I think that having a little bit more in school is very necessary for the future. You know, it's just looking where school is going with, especially the United States is a pretty rough example. I think that there is something definitely in the education system that needs to change, and change drastically. I think it's very outdated and very old-fashioned. One thing that I notice, and this all leads to what you were saying, a bit of a problem I'm personally having lately, and that I'm trying to train my mind to not think this way, but I can't help it. And it's that I'm looking at a lot of people that I've met, and they haven't done anything. I asked them, what is like the coolest thing that they've done, or what is something cool that they've done in the last 6 months? What'd you do this summer? What'd you do last winter? And then I asked them kind of what they're doing, or maybe we're assigned to do something together. The universe kind of brought us together, and we're on the same task together. I'm not talking as co-workers, but it's both of our job to plan some kind of event. And some of these people just don't know what to do. They have no ideas. They have no creativity because they've never done anything. I think one of the biggest variables for that is because they've never done anything in the past, and it just makes them not the best at doing these tasks. I noticed that the people who are the best, who are the absolute biggest assets in doing things and helping you with assignments that you want to get done, and planning events or throwing the best situations, are the ones that have had these experiences. And where my mind is going with this is that I look at these people and I'm like, you're pathetic. you, sir, you, ma'am, are pathetic. And I don't want to think like this, but what took you 6 hours to do, I could have done in 5 minutes,
Mhm.
not including the time it takes me to download the app to do it.
Mhm.
I think like what you're saying, if we had a school system, if we had an education system, if we had some kind of system for our children where they get more experiences rather than just sitting down, paper, pen, computer, screens, then it would make less pathetic people. A good example of this is that a buddy of mine who's now a CEO of this tech company, him and I, when we were 19, 20 years old, we wanted to hike from Mount Washington on Vancouver Island all the way to Tofino, which is like we calculated that it'd be about a 5-day hike. One of us was going to park our truck at the Forbidden Plateau, which is close to Mount Washington. One of us was going to park at the cross between Tofino and Ucluelet, whether you go left to Ucluelet and right to Tofino on the Pacific Rim Highway.
Mhm.
And we weren't going to bring anything. We were going to bring ourselves, a video camera, and a 2.6, or no, sorry, a Texas Mickey, which actually just ended up being a 60 of vodka. We weren't allowed to finish the trip unless this 60 of vodka was finished. Now, this just sounds like the most stupid thing that we could possibly do. You know, you have to drink like a few shots a day while you're trying to walk for 300 kilometers in the middle of the wilderness with no tent, no food. And so we found out real quick that this was a real bad idea. We were on the verge of starving the whole time. We had to hunt for our food. We had to set up fishing traps. We did a bit of research before going on this trip. It ended up raining the first night. We fortunately, my buddy actually brought this friend of his who's this like outdoor wilderness survival expert lady. And if things got too bad, then we would kind of like mooch off of her, which we actually ended up having to do quite a bit of. But fortunately, it was also berry season. So just along the trail, there were so many berries and we were constantly picking berries and eating them. And it was really good weather after the first day. But at the end of the trip, we ended up kind of getting lost. And we came up to this area called Kennedy Lake, which is close to Tofino. And Tofino is kind of a hippie town, I want to say. And as we pull up on this, one of the most amazing, beautiful beaches, just white sand on a lake. How often do you see that? White sand on a lake. It's usually always the ocean. This like group of hippie ladies from Tofino, just all tops off, just approached us. And it was like we made it to the finish line, and this was our prize, just to hang out with this awesome group of people. There was like this group of great individuals, these hippies from Quebec, who were like fire spinning, and they made us hot dogs and such. We were so hungry. I probably ate like 10 hot dogs. And then that night, me and my buddy, we passed out on the bridge, and we were looking up at the stars, and it was the best meteor shower I've ever seen in my life. It was probably the most romantic moment of my life. Just too bad it was with a dude. It was one of my best friends. And that experience, me and him walked away from that. We didn't even talk for the next 2 months. We couldn't. It was just such an amazing experience. But we came back and something changed about us. I noticed his IQ was changed. He like got smarter by 20 degrees of IQ. I don't know if that's high or low, but he was just a smarter human being, having this experience, being on the verge of death, on the verge of success, the best meteor shower, very romantic. Just all these experiences all built up into one really changed both of us. And I think a lot of my success to having experiences like this, because I go out and do it. I go out and do it because the last thing I want to be is pathetic.
It's interesting that the experience you just described is, in tribal cultures, there are traditions around initiation into manhood, and most of those initiations, um, there's a risk of death. There's a risk of dying, and in our culture, that's predominantly absent. And so, like what I observe, I've observed this in my older two sons for sure. I'm sure my youngest is right on their heels, and I've observed it in lots of young men as well. There's like that is absent, and so they'll create instinctually. They'll create their own, much like you and your friend, where you have this outrageous plan, and you'll create instinctually create those experiences that are going to test you and push you. But without those experiences, I think that what happens is that like inner boy who doesn't fully trust himself is still living inside a lot of grown men, where they haven't been like, I survived that and was met by topless Tofino women, like all the elements of the story with like the food at the end of it. Like this is actually in traditional initiation or rites of passage experiences. Those elements are all there: fasting, lack of food, being out in the elements, and then also being welcomed by a group of people and being fed food. And so it makes total sense to me that you also would describe it as like falling asleep on the bridge, looking at the stars, as being one of the most romantic moments, because in that moment you met yourself. You met like yourself to a deeper level than most people get to have. That, it's a privilege to go through an initiation like that. And unless you're creating it yourself in this day and age, most people aren't having those experiences. It's easier for women. Our initiation predominantly is through childbirth, right? So it's different. But I really truly believe that men need to face adversity and near death to actually be initiated into manhood to the fullest extent. That, this having that experience gives you all these elements of knowing what you are capable of, right? And then that experience plus, I'm sure you have a dozen more stories like that allow you to move through life with confidence and competence, because you know what you're made of. And that's what I would say, like from an observer standpoint, that's what you're observing. And when you meet somebody and they haven't had those experiences, they don't have that level of self-trust, self-reliance, self-belief that you're operating under.
Wow, that kind of blew my mind, not gonna lie. When you say through childbirth, you mean when the woman is giving childbirth, that's how she's kind of introduced into womanhood?
I would definitely say that's the greatest initiation into womanhood that I've experienced, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's an initiation. For an initiation to be a true initiation, requires that you have no control over the situation, and that death is present, right? And that for women, childbirth is definitely that. You have no control over that situation, unless, I mean, now, interestingly enough, the time we live in, there's all these interferences in childbirth that happen. I gave birth at home alone 4 times, and
home alone
with my partner, with my husband, like just the 2 of us for the first one, just the 3 of us for the second one. Like the older brothers were there as the next ones came.
Oh, yeah.
But we didn't have like a midwife for anybody, and it was beautiful.
Wow,
like,
that's hardcore.
It was hardcore, absolutely. I was like 19 the first time I did it, but I wouldn't do it any other way. And I think it's another experience that often is like robbed from women or taken away from women by having intervention, medical intervention or whatever, when this is something our bodies are designed to do. We are, naturally, we're, in terms of evolution, we're the cream of the crop. We're like the ones who have survived this far. We're meant to do this. And yet we live in an era and a time where there's so much intervention and very unnecessary. But yeah, I would say that, like, aside from the few jiu-jitsu competitions I've been to, which were also felt like an initiation, and other experiences, like I traveled alone, things like that. But yeah, I think for women, childbirth is kind of the ultimate initiation. You know, there are other things that we can experience for sure, but yeah, but it's different. Our like um I don't think that women need to face adversity to the degree that men do in order to be to reach their optimal potential. Like we also thrive facing adversity and knowing what we're made of. The trip that you described of
Mhm.
hiking through the woods is like something that benefits us as well. But it's yeah, I mean, that's a long conversation. But of course, like men are the stronger, more like you guys are stronger than us for a reason, right?
Not when I was 9 years old.
Not when you were 9 years old, no. But how about now? You know,
Yeah, the only experience I get wrestling girls is in jiu-jitsu class, and there's definitely some tough ladies, I'll tell you.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Can't deny that.
I think you and I wrestled. I had a hard time with you. I was struggling.
Yeah, I remember I tried out my spider guard on you.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
will say, I think that people think I'm wrong when I say this, but I think I'm right when I say that I think women with short legs, especially like a woman that's like 5'1", 5 feet tall, or a guy that's 5'1", 5 feet, that's the best spider guard. The most crazy spider guards I've ever been in jiu-jitsu is like a short person, short legs that can fully extend their legs and then just have you there completely pinned is way better than someone that with long legs um, that has to bend their legs and that are so easy to bend and get around. I don't know, some of the most wicked spider guards. Just like, what is going on? I feel like I'm speaking a different language of fighting right now.
Totally, I know what you mean with the different body proportions that lend itself to different techniques, especially in jujitsu, right? Everybody's got their game for their body that works for them. But yeah, I know what you mean. They're like little Klingons, the body that you're describing. You're like, I can't get out. Yeah, totally.
Absolutely. I think a lot to jiu-jitsu specifically, like that whole circumstance of coming to Salt Spring Island and meeting all you guys, like just jiu-jitsu and just getting out there and saying yes.
Yeah.
Saying yes to an offer that comes your way, and just yeah. I follow this page called the Yes Theory, and their whole thing is seek discomfort. And I think we're a lot of people that, I hate to use the word pathetic, but that's the only word I can think of right now, that would consider to be like that, would just take one thought of it and without even considering it, without even considering the benefits or the the things that could go wrong, they're just saying no, I'm not going to come to Salt Spring, no, I'm not going to go meet all these awesome individuals, no, I'm not going to stay in some random Airbnb and live there for 4 days while I just do jiu-jitsu with a bunch of Salt Springers. No, I'm not doing that. But if you seek discomfort and if you like to do things that suck, then say yes to an amazing opportunity, because you just might wind up on an amazing podcast.
Absolutely. I love it. This will lead me to my last question, I guess, unless you have anything else you want to share, but I'll ask this one. I'm curious if you have an overall philosophy that you think has served you well both as a fighter and as a man in every aspect of your life, an overall philosophy or lens that and I mean, you probably kind of already shared it just now in that, like saying yes to hard things or yes to discomfort or uncertainty. But is there anything else that you use as like a philosophy or the lens of that guides you in your life?
Yeah, you might have to give me 20 seconds.
You got it.
You know, I have a lot of philosophies that I've been living by, and I consider myself quite a philosophical person. And whenever life's just all about learning, and when you hit one brick wall, I like to create a philosophy on why that happened, and so that brick wall has a doorway next time I meet it.
Mhm.
One philosophy, when I was young, my mom always used to drop me off at school, and the last thing she would say to me is, treat people the way that you want to be treated. So being 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, I was always living the life with the persona of treat people the way I wanted to be treated. As an MMA fighter, you realize quickly that not everyone wants to be treated the way that you want to be treated. So I had to change my philosophy, because I don't know, being young and restless, I'd see a buddy of mine and maybe like tackle him to the ground, like, hey, how's it going? Give him a couple of love taps. And not everyone wants that, right? And I have guy friends that are a little softer and don't want to be tackled to the ground every time they see me. I wouldn't do that, but that's just like an example of a brick wall that I might have run into in high school. So I changed that philosophy to treat people the way that they want to be treated. And I liked that one for a long time, and people really liked it too. I just noticed my social skills begin to improve. But then I found some people that I really didn't want to treat them the way that they wanted to be treated. Because, well, then I'm a simp. almost to put it bluntly, but I'm changing my personality to treat someone with a way that I don't believe is right. So I guess I'm right now in the middle of trying to change this philosophy, and I don't know exactly what to change it to. I can't always treat people the way that I want to be treated, and I can't always treat people the way that they want to be treated. Maybe figure out a way in between, because being able to put yourself on the spot and know what situations and what philosophies to, which leads me to one other quick philosophy here. Words are so easy to say. Say a word right now. Say any word.
Fast.
Yeah. How easy was that?
It's easy.
It is so easy to say any word on the planet, and being able to control those words and use those words that you say to your advantage to just maximize the situation that you're in right now is so advantageous to people's lives. I find a word that people have a really hard time with saying is sorry. Now, let's say you and I are angry at each other. I can't imagine being angry at you, but imagine we are.
I'm good.
And you're not going to agree with my point of view, and I'm not going to agree with your point of view. So next thing you know, next week, my brain is just absolutely clouded with the fact that I think you did something wrong. I know I did something wrong, but I'm expecting you to kind of say the words that need to be said, but you're never going to say them because you're thinking the exact same thing as me. So next thing you know, I'm 30% less productive at work. My head isn't in the right zone when I'm training for my next fight. My next fight comes around and I lose because I'm only at like 60% mental capacity right now because I'm not able to say sorry to you. If I can just get over my own persona, if I can just put my reputation aside for a second and say the words that need to be said in this specific circumstance, to say, hey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to kick your butt when I was 9. No. That thing, hey, completely my fault. I just want you to know, I hope you're doing good with whatever you're doing, your podcast, your website that you're developing. I'm sorry about that. Let me grab you a coffee sometime. Next thing you know, maybe I didn't fully mean those words, but just saying them creates this situation between me and you. Now we're great friends again. Next time I see you, you provide some kind of asset to my life, which benefits my life, which next thing you know, puts me in an amazing head zone so that I'm kicking butt next time I'm training for this amazing fight that I actually ended up winning because I'm in the zone. All because I have control over my own words and I didn't let emotions take control of my words.
Yeah, what I hear in that is really also just the awareness of, like, we cannot control how other people respond to us or what their reaction is, but we have 100% responsibility for our own place in any relationship. So if you're sitting there with like, oh, I need to say sorry, and this goes back to what we were talking about before of the greatest gift you can give to anyone else is your own well-being. We don't apologize for anyone else. We're actually apologizing for ourselves because we need to own our own part in it. But what I see often happens is people are apologizing, wanting it to be like, because they want something from the other person. They're like, I want you to now apologize, right? Rather than it just being like, oh, I messed up and I need to be in integrity with myself. So I'm going to own this and I'm going to apologize. And that's, so my mentor like shares this philosophy of the greatest gift that we have for others being our own well-being, and the greatest freedom we can have is letting other people have their own experiences. Because where you might be ready to say sorry to me and clean up whatever miscommunication or mishap we had and go for coffee and be assets in each other's lives again, I might be having my own experience where I'm like, oh no, I'm holding on to this and I'm still really mad. So there's like, this is where like one of the rules or laws that I live by in my life is really maintaining my own integrity with myself and not saying yes to business opportunities. I don't say yes to clients. I don't say yes to mentorship. I don't say yes to friendship, relationships of any kind that I don't really want to be there. If I don't want to be there, I'm not going to do it. And that's like a standard I have in my own business of, if I wouldn't welcome you into my home or want to go to a jiu-jitsu class with you or go on a road trip or go out dancing, I won't work with that person as a client. And that was like a standard that I created in my business, and it's also in my personal life. So I'm not in those situations where I'm like, oh, I don't really want to be here. Because I think that's one of the biggest disservices we give each other. I mean, I have this rule even with kids where I'm like, hey, if you want to be at a friend's house and there's like a dinner happening at their house, or you want to go play basketball after school, like, and that's what's lighting your heart up, I don't want you to come home and like be at home for dinner because I said you have to be here. Like, I want to know that you're at home because you want to be there. And that has created a lot of like freedom, connection, intimacy, expansion, like mutual support in especially the relationship with my kids, in all of my friendships, because you never doubting, like, does this person really want to be here? They're free to be themselves. And it's like maybe a fairly simple formula, but I feel like a lot of relationships would flourish if people were operating from that standpoint of like, how can I really own? And I totally agree with you that rule of like, treat other people how you want to be treated. It doesn't really work. Like, everybody has different needs and everyone is bringing something different to the table. Like, we all have our own gifts that we're here to share. And so, like, your contribution is going to be different than someone else's contribution. Yeah, I could go on about that one.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I can see that your kids are very important to you, and I always admire that in a parent. And also with what you said, you're absolutely right. You don't know what's happening with other people. You don't know, you can put yourself in their shoes, but you can put yourself in their shoes, but you're never really going to know what's going on with them, right? So yeah, I kind of created that theory around just friends that I've seen in the past absolutely kind of ruin their lives just because they couldn't say the words that need to be said in a specific scenario. and now their life is way worse off than where it could be right now. A lot of it is stubbornness. Others is just not, mainly stubbornness.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a way that a lot of, well, I think it's actually stems from this idea that we like own our friends, or we own our partners, or we own our children. And we don't. Like, I have a great relationship with my kids because I never treat them like I own them, and they are free to do what they want. My 15-year-old is in Brazil right
In
now.
Brazil, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like, people are like, aren't you worried? Or like, you know, all the different questions that I get. I'm like, no, like, he's doing exactly what he needs to be doing and having exactly the experience he needs. And we talk on the phone. It's great.
And most specifically, he's not my property. He's free to do it.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the one of the things that messes up a lot of relationships, is where people are like, I now own you, and you're doing this thing that's different than my vision for what you should be doing. And well, actually the source of a lot of conflict between.
That's just going to push them away, I feel.
Yeah, definitely. Or they'll share less and less of their life. You know, like, if you are really committed to something like winning a fight, for example, and you're not going to share that vision with somebody who's not able to support you in that vision. If you want to be successful, if your success isn't important, then you're going to be willing to share your vision with lots of people. But if your success in that vision is really paramount, you're going to keep it to yourself, share it very selectively with a few people who are going to be like, hell yeah, go for it, you got this. And that's certainly what I noticed in my my 15-year-old, and his making plans to go to Brazil. You know, he was very, it was masterful, the plan, all of it. But yeah, it can be another one of those, going back to what you're talking about, when people are just, they have all these great ideas, but they're not implementing them. They're not taking action. There's that dopamine rush that people have when they talk about their cool things that they're going to do. And, like, you're having drinks and you're talking about all the cool things you're going to do that never, ever happen. But there's a dopamine cycle that happens there, where it's like, oh, we talked about it and it was so great. And then it dies. Whereas if you hold your own vision sacred, like, the most sacred visions that you have, you probably have told almost no one. And that's true for all of us. That's true for all of us, where you have this sacred vision. Maybe it's not even like a fully fledged vision. It's just like a feeling of wanting to create greatness in the world. And you have, like, little glimpses of what that might look like, but not the full vision. And it's hard to even articulate it to anyone else, but it's there. It burns inside you. It, like, keeps you awake at night. Like, it's there. And when you hold that sacred and honor it, this, I believe, is what legends are made of. And I was thinking about this yesterday. I actually remember one of the first times you and I talked, we talked about the legend of Troy. I think, was that you and I? And I'm like questioning, and Achilles.
Oh, Achilles, yes.
Achilles, yeah. And like, I was thinking about it, and the question, I was walking in the fields, and the question I had was, if you were Achilles, do you think that he knew that he would be a legend, like, when he was living his life? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's all these stories that we hear of people, great people from the past. And I was wondering, like, would they know right now? Like, the people who are the legends of today, who will be remembered 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, like, are we going to know while they're alive, or will many of them be acknowledged after they're dead? Like,
yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because that's actually, when you're asking me my question of the 1,000 years from now, what would I hope that they're kind of talking about? The movie Achilles was exactly what I was kind of thinking about, was that there's like a scene when Achilles and his cousin are kind of just sword fighting, having fun, and then the general of the Greek army approaches him and says that there's going to be a huge war between Greece and Troy. But Achilles is done. He's fought in enough battles for a king that he doesn't really follow. And as the general's walking away, he knows how to get under the skin of Achilles and bring him, because Achilles is the greatest warrior in the world. He says, this war will never be forgotten. Schools, roads, books will be written about this war. And the heroes of it will never be forgotten. And I think Achilles wasn't going to go to fight in Troy, but that got him, because he wants to be remembered, because he didn't want his name to have an expiration date. He didn't want his name to depreciate or amortize. But to answer your question, I think it's a little different now because of Google. It's way easier to find people probably now, and 1,000 years from now, unless something apocalyptic happens. It's going to be quite easier to just find someone on Google, or some AI will be able to easily find you. Whereas Achilles, who had no concept of the internet at all, it probably was gonna, he would probably be very mind blown now that he has a movie of him starring Brad Pitt.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I always wonder, because we have Google, and because we have this time where the whole world is connected, and there are all these like big names who get talked about all the time, and seem to have like a heavy influence because of media, and yet in your everyday life, are those people really impacting you, or is it just because you're giving them your attention? You know, like politicians, for example, or people who control a lot of the products or services of the world. You know, like they play a big part they take up a lot of room in most people's mind. But I wonder, like on a day-to-day basis, who influences your life the most? To me, it's not anybody. It's not a politician or anybody famous. Like the people who influence my life the most on a day-to-day basis are like my jiu-jitsu coach and my close friends and my kids and my clients and my mentors. You know, like that's my realm that I live in. But yeah,
I'd say same.
Pardon me?
The same for me as well. Yeah. The people that I look up to around me.
Yeah. Without access to media, I think it would be such a different world. Which I'm excited for. I'm planning an event that will be held this spring. That's going to be like out in the wilderness. Hopefully without any Wi-Fi or devices, like a 4-day business mastermind for entrepreneurs to come out and like leave that whole world behind for 4 days and really drop in. So I'll tell you more about that some other time. But
I want to come.
Yes, I would love for you to come and be there. There's also going to be a martial arts element of it. So
right on.
When I have it written up, I'll send you the invitation. Yeah.
I'll put on my white belt, so none of these other corporate executives will be intimidated at all.
Nice. And then throw them to the ground. Just judo slam after judo slam.
Yeah, write off all of your clients.
That's right. We'll make sure there's on site as well. Well, thank you so much for joining me and being my second guest here on the Warriors Raised podcast. Totally an honor, Josh. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Come